Hello, fellow football fanatics. It is College Football with Sam, and I am pumped to share with you all my preseason top 25 winter edition for the 2023 season. I do not consider this a way too early top 25, as you can never be too early in making predictions, and this video took hours of research and hours of time editing. This is a high quality video, so I would appreciate it if you hit the like button and watched all the way through so we can get a good quality video like this into the algorithm. Please subscribe if you haven't already and comment your thoughts on this video after you've watched it down below. I have about a minute of explaining to do that I just want to talk about this video before we get into the actual top 25. We will be going from team number 25 down to team 1. I'll be talking for about a minute to minute and 30 seconds about each team, talking about their strengths, weaknesses, schedule, program outlook, some key returning players, and key players who might have breakout seasons, so on, so forth. Each team and each conversation about each team is and will be unique. The video outside of that is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm just going to get right into it. But this video, I'm so excited to share it with you guys. It took a lot of time and dedication, and it was all worth it. And you're going to see that when we talk about number 25, Kansas. Man, these templates, they're beautiful. Number 25, Kansas. Let's get into the top 25. I think Kansas will go 8-4, 5-4 in Big 12 play. Kansas will play BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati, 3 of the 4 new teams that will be joining the Big 12 before Oklahoma and Texas bolt for SEC play in 2024. Kansas is incredibly strong at quarterback. They have Jalen Daniels, who for a while had the number 1 QBR in 2022, according to ESPN, and they have quality backup Jason Bean. The quarterback room, I think, is one of the best in the nation. I think them and USC with Heisman winner Caleb Williams are in a tier of their own when it comes to the quarterback position. Kansas is a criminally underrated team on offense. They're top 5 in returning production overall. Their defense is where I would say their weaknesses are. They had one of the worst defenses according to points allowed per game and efficiency metrics last year, but they had one of the best offenses in efficiency metrics and a good to great offense by points scored per game. They finished last year with a 6-7 record, losing to Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl. I think Kansas will have their first winning season since the Mark Mangino era, and it will be because of Jalen Daniels and Andy Kotelnicki and Lance Leipold, the latter two being the offensive coordinator and the head coach for the Jayhawks, respectively. Next up, we got number 24, UCLA, who I also think will go 8-4, 5-4 in conference. UCLA is another team that I think is incredibly strong at the quarterback position. Colin Schlee is transferring in from Kent State, and Dante Moore is coming in from the 2023 recruiting class out of Michigan, where he played high school at Martin Luther King. I think both will get playing time, but I think Dante Moore, with his higher ceiling, will end up winning the job. Bill McGovern and the defense, Bill McGovern's the defensive coordinator down there, I think are very questionable. But this offense, especially with incoming transfer Carson Steele at running back, they'll have a good run game, they'll have a great pass game, they'll have great quarterback play, and Chip Kelly is an offensive mastermind. I think UCLA, along with the rest of the Pac-12, has a very tough schedule. The Pac-12 is incredibly deep this year, and UCLA doesn't get any favors by having Utah, Oregon State, and USC on their schedule, and I think they will also get upset on the road by Arizona. But at quarterback and running back, Chip Kelly and the spread option that they run at UCLA, I think will endure another year of success. At number 23, we have the Auburn Tigers, who, along with Michigan State, I believe could have the toughest schedule in the country. Auburn will be known for Hugh Freeze. That's exactly what Auburn will be known for in 2023. That will be the storyline. What can he do with a program that is currently, from the national perception, busted and viewed as the hardest job in the nation? Well, with Robbie Ashford, Jarquez Hunter, an offensive line, defensive line, and linebacker room that are being rebuilt and retooled by the transfer portal, I think Auburn can do a lot more than people might expect. I think they will go 8-4, 4-4 in SEC play. Having Georgia and Alabama on the same schedule year after year is incredibly tough, especially when you add an LSU, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. That SEC West schedule plus Georgia really hurts. But Auburn has talent. I think Robbie Ashford, with Hugh Freeze's coaching and Philip Montgomery's coaching as the offensive coordinator, I think he will transform into a good quarterback. And with a running back room that is among the best in the nation, Auburn will find success on the offensive side of the ball, and they will improve with retooling in the portal on the defensive side of the ball. I also think, yes, Hugh Freeze is going to continue his tradition of beating Alabama or playing incredibly close to them. I think he's upsetting them in year one. Number 22, the reigning national title runner-ups. You didn't think I was going to end at national title, did you? TCU, who lost 7-65 to Georgia. I still can't believe that massacre occurred on national TV. That national title game should be made for adult audiences only because of violence, because of murder. Anyway, all jokes aside, I think TCU is going to retool through the portal because of Trey Sanders, JoJo Earl, and Tommy Brockmeyer. TCU is bringing in highly talented individuals out of high school from the portal. I just mentioned 3 Alabama incoming transfers. Kendall Briles is coming in at offensive coordinator to replace Garrett Riley. The defense, as we've seen a theme with a lot of these 25 to so far 20 teams, the defense is a problem here. TCU in 2022 had mostly seniors and juniors starting. A lot of those players ran out of eligibility or declared for the draft. So Texas Christian, I think, is going to take a huge step back. But 9-3, 6-3, they'll still be a top 25 team. I think their wide receiver room will be the strength of this unit. Chandler Morris will be starting at quarterback after Max Duggan has departed and ran out of eligibility, left for the NFL. TCU will still be a formidable team, and a team that can certainly contend for the Big 12 still, after what was an incredible, unforeseen run in 2022. North Carolina and the Tar Heels are up next. And boy, oh boy, you see that C+ right there. You probably can already tell where this is going. I think Mac Brown and the staff at North Carolina are the problem. It's not the talent. You have Kobe Paysor at wide receiver. You have Drake May at quarterback. You have a team that overall is pretty good in returning production. And outside of secondary, you have 4 stars and 5 stars everywhere on the roster. This team, with a different coach, head coach specifically, I think would be destined for greater things. That's my criticism and kind of program direction talk about North Carolina. I think that North Carolina will be a team that when playing ACC competition or inferior will dominate, or they will tire out opponents, but there will be parts where they will get upset, and when they play teams that have great defenses or teams that have great trench play, i.e. Minnesota, I think they will get boat raced. But overall, a 9-3 team that I think can be scary and that can intimidate and push around any defense with their passing game and with their offensive line and run game. North Carolina has been really beefing up with 5-star and 4-star recruits on the offensive line over the past few recruiting cycles. Defensive back will be a key weakness. Wide receiver and especially quarterback with Drake May will be a great strength of the Tar Heels. I think they'll go 9-3, 6-2 in conference, could potentially contend for an ACC championship game appearance once again. Ole Miss at number 20, another 8-4 team. I think this might be the last of the 8-4s here. But Ole Miss, I think the hiring of Pete Golding as defensive coordinator, I think was certainly an upgrade over their past defensive staff. Lane Kiffin is a coach who I think is made by his staff. Really needs his staff around him. He has a personality, and he's an effective recruiter, especially in the portal, and he's a great offensive schemer. But I think as a head coach, who he has on his staff is really important, and I like the Pete Golding hire. I just do. Don't exactly know why. But with Judkins at running back, Jackson Dart, he'll be competing with Spencer Sanders, and he'll also be competing with an incoming LSU transfer whose name escapes me, Walker Howard, who is a high 4-star quarterback out of high school. I think this team, once again, will mainly be a run team. They have quarterback depth, but one of those three is going to be leaving for sure after spring practice is said and done, and none of those three quarterbacks are great. They're good at best. Ole Miss, like Auburn, has a brutal schedule, and I think that road game at Tulane is it's just a total unexplained but yet explained loss at a Tulane team that returns Michael Pratt. They also have road games at both Alabama and Georgia. So Ole Miss could be a team that's 8-4 or 9-3, and they could be playing at a top 10 level with the schedule they have. They also bring in a 5-star recruit at linebacker and have a top 10 transfer portal class. I think they'll improve over last year's disappointing collapse. Now we're finally cracking teams that are ranked above number 20. Most of these teams will have 9, 10, you might even see 11 wins before we get to the top 10. Notre Dame's at number 19. Marcus Freeman and Gerard Parker and Al Golden. Those are your head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Much like North Carolina, I think the staff here might be the weakness, not necessarily the talent. At quarterback, Sam Hartman's coming in. Long term, it's a band-aid on a bullet wound, but short term, it is a genius retooling of a room that has plagued Notre Dame with issues over the past few seasons. Notre Dame this season has the toughest schedule I think that they have had in quite some time, playing Ohio State, USC, Clemson, and then you got teams like Duke, Louisville, NC State, Pittsburgh, all teams that I think will have winning records in ACC play, and playing three teams that could all be in the top 10, 8, 6, dare I say it, teams that all have top 4 potential easily. Notre Dame loses so much on defense, but they return Jack Kaiser at linebacker. At running back, they have Audric Estime, Chris Tyree. I don't think that will be a great running back room, but they are underrated players. They're players who, they have a power element to them. And Notre Dame last year was a team that thrived off of running the football. And it wasn't necessarily because they had great running backs, but because of their offensive line, who returns just enough starters and depth players that I think once again Notre Dame will be able to run and grind through and get wins by playing that power pro-style football that they were, I just want to say, in love with last year. They didn't even use Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner if their lives depended on it. They just ran the football. Number 18, Iowa. Another team when you think about pro-style, toughness, offensive line. But you haven't seen offensive line all that much these past 2 seasons at Iowa. In 2021, it was a problem. Last year, the offensive line was a disaster. I think with Cade McNamara coming in at quarterback and Eric All coming in at tight end, Dejon Parker at offensive tackle, along with Rusty Feth and most of the O-line returning, Iowa's offense, it's going to take a big step forward. Will it be great or even good? I don't exactly think so, especially since their wide receiver room looks to probably be porous for the second year in a row. But at defensive back, with Cooper DeJean returning, they'll be great. Their defensive line will be among one of the best in the nation. At linebacker, special teams, tight end, Iowa has depth and discipline and an unheard of quality of play at so many positions. They kind of have 7 to 8 built-in wins, and then an upgrade at quarterback, I think will push Iowa to that 10-2, 7-2 record in the Big Ten West. I think that a road game at Penn State and at Wisconsin, and maybe even a road game at Nebraska, could present some challenges, but overall a team that I think will be very solid in 2023. Kansas State, the reigning Big 12 champions. Will Howard. Those are 2 words, but one name. One name that I want to talk about. Will Howard. The other one being Cooper Beebe, and the fact that all 4 of his other comrades on the offensive line are returning. Kansas State is a team that I think is set to have another top 25, more specifically top 20 year. I think they will go 10-2, 7-2 in conference play. I also want to say, before we get further, and you will see why I mention this here, this does not include, the records and the schedules do not include conference championship game predictions, bowl predictions, college football playoff predictions either. But those predictions are factored into each team's individual ranking. You will see where I am going with this in just a few teams further down the line. But Kansas State, I think they will have one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in the country. Will Howard is a certainly underrated player, could be a dark horse Heisman candidate, and Kansas State's schedule is very manageable. I cannot state that enough. Number 16, we got Tennessee. Joe Milton at quarterback, I think, could very well win the Heisman just with the system he has in place, combined with a wide receiver room that is very underrated. Bringing in Dante Thornton, I believe, from Oregon, and also returning Squirrel White, who I think last year was a backup, or at least some like a on and off starter for Tennessee. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a player who shined in the Orange Bowl. Same with Joe Milton, and he is going to be Tennessee's best wide receiver this coming season. The offensive line should continue to improve. Josh Heupel's one of the best offensive minds in the country. I don't think losing Alex Golesh is going to have a big effect, if any effect, in year one. With Tennessee, they play both Alabama and Georgia yearly, which again is tough. That would be like, Penn State or Michigan State playing Ohio State or Michigan yearly in their current forms. It's very tough. But this offense will make any defense shake. It might make any defense break with Joe Milton. If he improves his accuracy, he has limitless arm potential, and that wide receiver room will carry him, even if he is inaccurate at times or doesn't make the greatest decisions. They're going to retool at wide receiver. They're going to retool at tight end, offensive line. They return both their starting backs, who I don't think are great players, but with a solid O-line and with experience, that running game, they'll be able to compensate for any potential mistakes in that pass game, which is what Tennessee's known for, that no huddle, up-tempo, striking with death passing game. I think they'll go 9-3, 6-3 in conference, but I don't think they will contend at all for the SEC East. I think Georgia, I'm 100% sure that Georgia's winning the SEC East. At number 15, we have Wisconsin. I remember one viewer saying, thank goodness, and this was on an announcement that I made yesterday. The comment said, thank goodness there's not the obligated top 20 Wisconsin ranking. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but what Luke Fickell is doing at Wisconsin, this team could be not just the Big Ten West champions next year, they could be a top 10 team year one. With what they're doing in the portal, bringing in Tanner Mordecai, Nick Evers, and another player whose name escapes me from Mississippi State, they're going to have solid quarterback depth. They return Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi at running back. They'll have one of the best running back rooms in the country. Keem Ray Dike, who's pictured right here, underrated wide receiver, led Wisconsin in receiving yards this past season. And with Phil Longo as the offensive coordinator, Mike Tressel as the defensive coordinator, they have one of the best staffs nationally. They have talent on their roster and the offensive and defensive lines, and at running back, they're retooling using the portal. The weakness of this team, I wouldn't even say, is anything on their roster or staff. It's their schedule and the fact that everything is in year one. They're not gelled yet, and there's some variability in how this team will function. They host Ohio State instead of traveling them on the road, which is okay, but they also have a non-conference road game at Washington State. Special teams has been an issue for Wisconsin these past 2 years. So can Luke Fickell bring Wisconsin to greatness in year one? We'll see. I think he can certainly do it. Number 14, Texas. And this is where I was talking about how championship game and postseason predictions aren't pictured up here. They're not factored into my record predictions. These are just regular season predictions, but they're factored into the ranking. I have Texas ranked ahead of Kansas State, despite having an additional loss and losing to Kansas State, which means, hint, and in my post-spring and summer edition top 25s, I want to implement championship game and official college football playoff predictions. This means I have Texas picked to win the Big 12. And indeed I do. Quinn Ewers at quarterback, but that isn't the biggest story because Quinn Ewers was a disappointment last year, if we're being honest. It is Isaiah Nair, Noah Whittington, and Xavier Worthy at wide receiver. No wide receiver room even comes close to rivaling that outside of Ohio State, who I think is ahead of it by a few feet, ahead of Texas's wide receiver room. Also, their offensive line returns all 5 of their starters. They'll be one of the best offensive lines in the country. And their special teams unit, which is bringing in, I think, a transfer punter, and they were super duper efficient last year, according to ESPN. Listen, Texas is back. I made a video with well-documented research a few days or weeks ago about this, and I'm just sort of regurgitating some of these facts here, talking about Texas. They have a road game against Alabama at week 2, and with the amount of returning production that Texas has and the few amount of returning starters that Alabama has, if Texas comes in and beats Alabama, you should not be surprised. And that's where I'm going to leave it at that, because there will be some angry comments resulting from that. Okay, number 13, Oregon State. Oregon State, they are set for another good season. And that took a little long to develop, but I had to think through it because they lose so much on defense, but they retool on offense. They return their running backs. They return their offensive line, which should once again, look at these programs that have had great offensive lines over the past few seasons. They just keep rebuilding at offensive line, and Oregon State's one of those. And then at quarterback, they have an upgrade. Quarterback has not been their strength in the Jonathan Smith era, despite his work with Jake Browning at Washington. They bring in DJ Uiagalelei, who has potential, who has upside, and I think will be Jonathan Smith's best quarterback in his Oregon State tenure as head coach. Special teams should be good. I think Oregon State will reload at the defensive line, linebacker and defensive back. We'll see in regards to that. But I think this team could contend for a college football playoff spot. That's for sure. I think they could contend for that, and I think they will. I think that their last 2 games of the year will unfortunately put those hopes to rest. Hosting Washington, playing at Oregon, who will want to have that revenge in the rivalry series. But I think they'll go 10-2, 7-2 in conference, and I think there's a good chance that they look. This team, despite all of its lacking in talent by most talent indexes, they could win the Pac-12. They absolutely could. Oregon, their in-state rival at number 12. Oregon, Bo Nix at quarterback, Bucky Irving at running back, Troy Franklin, who's pictured at wide receiver, an offensive line that is consistently among the nation's best. They'll still have some Mario Cristobal recruits, and Dan Lanning has a great staff in Eugene, Oregon. Defense, again, will be a question mark surrounding this team, but they've recruited well in the portal on defense. So I think special teams will be a bigger concern for the Oregon Ducks this coming season than defense will. I think they'll go 9-3, 6-3 in conference again. 9-3 record they had last year, but they went 7-2 in conference. There's no Georgia week 1 on this schedule, but their Pac-12 slate I think gets tougher because they play Washington, Utah, and USC. I think Oregon is going to do great things in the Dan Lanning era. I like the hire right now. I didn't necessarily like it as much in the beginning, but Dan Lanning impressed me in year 1, and they have players. They have star players on offense. And Bo Nix, the transformation he made from Auburn to Oregon, phenomenal. Him coming back was huge for the Ducks. Cannot state that enough. This Oregon team could win the Pac-12. They could reach the college football playoff for the first time since the inaugural season in 2014 and break the Pac-12's playoff drought that they've had since 2016. Up next is Clemson, the first 11-win team that we're talking about. 11-1, 7-1 in conference is my prediction for them. I think they're going to be upset by North Carolina when they're preparing for that revenge spot against South Carolina. Home game against a team with a great offense after Clemson is losing gobs of talent on defense. That right there, that's a trap game spot. It's a total trap game spot. Dabo Swinney made a move. He made an absolute move when he hired Garrett Riley away from TCU. Now, I don't think, because of some of the question marks on the roster, especially because of the loss of defensive production, the fact that Clemson still isn't using the portal, and they don't have any wide receivers. Let's not mistake that for anything. Their wide receiver room is one of the most barren when it comes to top 25 teams. But I think they will take a step forward compared to last year, and they certainly have a higher ceiling than they've had in the past 2 seasons. This team can reach the playoff and win a playoff game. Now, do I think they could win the national title? I'd say the odds of that are very slim. But they have the potential to reach the playoff. With the schedule they have, the fact that Florida State and Notre Dame, who I think from a ranking standpoint are their 2 toughest games, are at home, really benefits Clemson. This team could go undefeated and go 12-0, 13-0 if they win the ACC championship game, which I don't think they will, but I think they'll appear in it. They could reach the college football playoff and be competitive. I really love that Garrett Riley hire, and he is going to do great things with Cade Klubnik at quarterback. Will Shipley, who's pictured, could be an underrated dark horse Heisman candidate at running back. We're finally cracking the top 10. I'm getting really excited here, guys. Number 10, USC. 11-1, 8-1 in conference. Caleb Williams at quarterback. Mario Williams, his name escaped me for a few seconds, at wide receiver. I apologized. And Raleek Brown at running back. So that's a 3-headed monster right there on offense. Tight end, we know Lincoln Riley really isn't a fan of using tight ends. And offensive line, they lose some players there. But look, they've recruited well on defense, especially at linebacker through the portal. Mason Cobb from Oklahoma State, and then pairing him with a transfer from Arizona State who transferred in last year. Name escapes me, but amazing running back, freak of an athlete. I think USC will have one of the best linebacker rooms in the country. They'll have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, and I think they will have the best quarterback room in the nation because of Caleb Williams, who won last year's Heisman Trophy. They have talent on defense, so you're probably wondering, will USC's defense improve? My answer is no, but that has more so to do with the staff and the fact that I think Alex Grinch is, how do I put this? Alex Grinch is a bag of diarrhea coaching a bunch of 4- and 5-star talented players. Talent is not the problem on USC's defense. If they had Dan Lanning as their DC, if they had even Pete Golding I think is a good DC, but not a great one, as their DC, the defense would function much better. It's because of the staff that the defense is the issue, which is why I think that Utah is going to run through them when they host them after the Notre Dame game. Number 9, LSU. Speaking of diarrhea, which we talked about with USC and their defensive coordinator, let's talk about that same thing. I was trying to think of a worse analogy to make. Actually, I have one. Let's talk about a war crime, which was LSU's special teams last year. Louisiana State University had the second to worst special teams unit by efficiency, according to ESPN. It caused the Tennessee game to get out of control, which was LSU's only lopsided loss outside of their loss to the national champion Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC title game. LSU, look, they have a deep running back room. They return Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. Deep quarterback room. Jaden Daniels, fantastic scrambler, great playmaker. He's a solid thrower too. Not a great one, but with the offensive line that he had, I think it was sacked like 40 times last year. You do what you can do. And Jaden Daniels can scramble, make plays. I think LSU will have the best wide receiver room in the SEC with Malik Neighbors at wide receiver. He will be the star there. Defensive line, linebacker with Harold Perkins. Watch out. That kid is absolutely amazing. I don't think LSU is going to win the SEC West again for the second year in a row, but they will improve. They'll be 10-2, 7-1 in conference, and I think they will go to a New Year's 6 bowl game, which I will reveal that prediction in my next top 25. Hit the notification bell if you haven't already so you can get notified when I release that future top 25 video and any college football content. Number 8, Florida State, who I think will beat previously number 9, LSU. Florida State, Jaheim Bell at tight end. They also return Jared Verse at the defensive line, bring in Fentrell Cypress, another transfer like Bell, over from Virginia to be a part of one of the best secondaries in the country. Jordan Travis at quarterback. You keep naming these names, these high-impact guys. Jared Verse could have been drafted in the top 10 of this coming 2023 NFL draft. Jaheim Bell was the highest-rated tight end in the transfer portal. Fentrell Cypress was the highest-rated or second-highest-rated cornerback outside of Travis Hunter, who I forgot was a cornerback because he plays... Travis Hunter's really an all-purpose player, both cornerback and wide receiver. But anyway, you start naming these names, and then you remember that Mike Norvell and what he did at Memphis was phenomenal. He had great offenses there. And all these things begin to come together, and I think that Florida State's going to have a breakout year. They'll improve, 10-2, 6-2 in conference, which looks eerily similar to last year's record, just improving by 1 win. But a road game at Clemson's going to be tough. They already face a top 10 team in LSU, who I think they will beat. And I think that, road games against Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, Florida, those are tough matchups. But I think they will beat Clemson in a rematch in the ACC championship game, capturing their first ACC title since 2014. And they will likely play in the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl. They'll play in a New Year's 6 bowl game in which the ACC will be invited to. They'll have the best season since 2014. Number 7, Utah. 10-2, 7-2 in conference. It'll be their best regular season in a while. They did not get 10 wins, may I remind you, in the regular season in 2021 and 2022. They went 9-3 both years, winning their 10th in the Pac-12 title game. They will not be going to the Pac-12 title game this year. USC and Washington will be going to the Pac-12 title game. I didn't want to spoil the latter team, but there's only 6 teams left, and if you've listened to this channel, you know that I'm very high on Washington entering 2023. But we'll talk about that in a few seconds. Utah, I think, has one of the best staffs in the country. Andy Ludwig, who is sought after by Notre Dame. Morgan Scaley, who continues to produce the best defenses in the Pac-12 and Kyle Whittingham, who's one of the longest tenured head coaches in college football. That staff is phenomenal. Cameron Rising returns at quarterback. Tavion Thomas withdrew, I think Tavion Thomas or Micah Bernard. I forget which one withdrew their name from the portal and is returning, but Jaquindon Jackson plus them, that'll be a phenomenal running back room. Brant Kuthi, he's going to be healthy and is returning at tight end. And Utah should retool on defense, in my opinion. They have a tough schedule in the Pac-12, and they face 2 Power 5 non-conference opponents, but I think the Utes will be just fine. That run game, their tight ends, and Cameron Rising's quarterback play, this offense could contend for being the most balanced, methodical offense in the country. Not the most explosive or the highest scoring, but the most stable and one that might be the most efficient at winning football games. Number 6, Alabama. The Crimson Tide. They lose so much, it's not even funny. Let me talk about their returning production. 125th nationally. And look, they've been low before, and they've won a national title. But they have Kevin Steele at defensive coordinator, who I think is an overrated defensive coordinator. He's done well before, but a little older now. And I just, look, I think that's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, and I think that's a placeholder for a future defensive coordinator to come in. On offense, you got Tommy Rees at offensive coordinator. Young mind. I think he's going to bring Alabama back to more of that power run game, which I think will actually do well with Jalen Milroe at quarterback, who will be Alabama's most mobile quarterback since Jalen Hurts. At running back, Chase McClellan, he's going to be one of the nation's best running backs, that's for sure. CJ Dupree and Robbie Oates at tight end. That'll be fantastic as well. What I'm mainly looking at for Alabama, despite the fact that I think their defensive staff is the weakest part of their staff, is their defense. They have Caleb Downs coming in on defensive back as a safety. I think he might be a true freshman starter. And they return Dallas Turner. At running back. And they also bring in, through junior college, linebacker Justin Jefferson. So they could have one of the best linebacker rooms in the country. And special teams, they return Will Reichard, who's Alabama's best kicker maybe in the entire Nick Saban era, and a solid punter. I think for the first time in the Nick Saban era, Alabama could have the nation's #1 special teams unit. Kind of a bold prediction, but that's just me. Alabama will fall short on the road against Auburn. I think this team will look similar to the past 2 teams in that they will struggle. They will not look like the Alabama teams of old, but it's not necessarily going to be because of the same inefficiency or poor staff. It's just going to be because this Alabama team will probably be the least talented Alabama team and the most green Alabama team that we've seen in ages. Speaking of teams that are green and that don't have talent and don't return a whole lot, that's not Penn State. Penn State is around number 50 in returning production, which is in the top half nationally. They return Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen at running back. I think that right there is a top 5 running back duo in the nation, along with Michigan, along with Ohio State. Heck, it might even be top 3. Heck, it could even be number 1. We'll just have to wait and see. Their offensive line returns all 4 of their starting guys, except for Juice Scruggs. That'd be the 5th in the center, as he ran out of eligibility. Olu Fashanu could be the nation's best tackle. At linebacker with Abdul Carter and Curtis Jacobs, and at secondary with Kalen King. Kalen King. Look, Penn State, whether you like Manny Diaz or not, whether you like James Franklin or not, I don't like James Franklin, or whether you like Mike Yurcich or not. You couldn't like college football if you didn't like Mike Yurcich because he's a successful offensive coordinator. Penn State, they are on the rise. I don't think they will reach the playoff in 2023, But I think that 2024, because a lot of these guys will be returning in 2024, especially Drew Aller, who will be making his first start in Penn State's first game against West Virginia, keep Penn State in your rearview mirror. Those games on the road against Ohio State and Michigan, those are the only two games that in truth matter. That's not to discount a road game against Illinois or hosting Iowa or traveling at Michigan State, but Penn State should, as they've proven, can beat all those teams. Ohio State and Michigan are the biggest question marks, and I think they once again will be that in 2023. We're finally getting to the top four. All of these teams will win from here on out their respective conferences. The only conference champion, Power 5, who is not going to be in the playoff, in my opinion, is Florida State, who we've already covered. Washington, despite losing to USC in the regular season, I think will win the Pac-12. I think with Michael Penix at quarterback, with Rome Odunze at wide receiver, along with Jalen McMillan, they will be a very successful team on offense. Defensively, they have Jabbar Muhammad at corner. They'll have a good corner room. Special teams, linebacker, running back, those are some question marks for this Washington squad. But Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, this offense will be humming. It will be efficient. Michael Penix, he was close to leading the nation in passing yards last season. I think he did lead the nation in passing yards in 2022. I think he'll probably do so again in 2023, and he could win the Heisman. So watch out for Washington. I think they will be the 4th seed in the college football playoff. Up next to number 3, Georgia, the reigning national champions. I think they will go undefeated in the regular season. You heard me right. Undefeated. They have the nation's best staff. They have the nation's best tight end room with Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp. They're underrated at wide receiver with Dominic Lovett. At running back, they return Kendall Milton. Carson Beck is going to be breaking in as the new quarterback. At defensive line, linebacker, defensive back, Malachi Starks is a key name to look at defensive back. They are loaded, and they will reload. They lose Jalen Carter, plug in Nazir Stackhouse, just as an example. This Georgia team very well could be on the way to three-peat. I think they will beat Alabama in the SEC title game, and I think that they will be the 2nd seed in the college football playoff, or the 1st. But I do not think they will three-peat. I think they will lose to one of the following teams. Most likely, due to seeding, they will lose to the next team in the Ohio State Buckeyes, who I think will go 11-1, 8-1 in conference, the sole loss being once again to Michigan. Ohio State, great staff, great offense, and I think their defense, with the amount of transfers they're bringing in, with guys like JT Tuimoloau and Tommy Eichenberg at defensive end and linebacker, Ohio State is going to take a solid step forward. I've talked about them a lot, along with Michigan. I think that these two teams are destined, along with Penn State, to improve over their past selves. Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan are all going to be better compared to their 2022 counterparts. And I think outside of Maryland and Indiana, that will be the case for the entire Big Ten East, which will be an extremely tough division, per usual, but tougher than usual. Ohio State will be breaking in a new quarterback. It'll either be Devin Brown or Kyle McCord. I think the latter will win the job. Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams at running back could be the best running back duo in the nation. Ohio State's main strength, I think, will be their offense. I think it'll be a more balanced offense than we've seen in the past 2 seasons. And I think on defense, the weakness will be defensive back, but it'll be one of the better defensive back rooms in the country nonetheless. The overall weakness of this team will be at tight end, but that more so has to do with schematics and depth than me and what I think of Cade Stover, who I think is a solid and good tight end. Last but not least, for sure, as I think they're winning the national title, the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan 12-0 9-0, they will be undefeated. Undefeated in the regular season. Once again, I think they will win the national title. At quarterback and wide receiver, are they elite? No. J.J. McCarthy, I think, will be a top 10 quarterback, but I don't think he'll play at the top 5 level. And at wide receiver, there is no unicorn there. There isn't really even a near elite wide receiver. There's a great wide receiver at best, and maybe Roman Wilson or Cornelius Johnson. But at running back, Michigan, I think, will far and away have the number 1 running back room. Maybe Penn State and Ohio State could say otherwise, but Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, who's stopping them behind Zach Zinner, Trevor Keegan, and incoming center Drake Nugent? At linebacker and at secondary, I think the Wolverines will have the best linebacker room in the country with guys like Junior Colson, incoming transfer Ernst Hausmann. Special teams is always solid for the Wolverines as well. This Michigan team, they're number 5 in returning production. They're number 3 when you look at only Power 5 teams. They're only behind, I think, Florida State and Kansas in the Power 5. And Michigan is a lot more in-house star talent. They have an easy schedule to start out the season. They have a road game against Penn State, against Michigan State. Road games against Minnesota, Nebraska, and Maryland won't fare either. But they host Ohio State. I think they'll win the Big Ten. I was actually incorrect in saying that all the teams in the top 4 would win their respective conferences. That was an incorrect statement because Ohio State's not winning the Big Ten. But I think Ohio State will win a playoff game, same with Michigan, and they will rematch in an epic battle in which Michigan will again, I think, proclaim victory and win the college football playoff. But again, these are very early predictions, and that is the conclusion of my top 25 video. It was a long video, I know, but thank you guys for watching, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and share this video around. Thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.